Have you ever heard a story that sends a chill down your spine? One that makes you question what lurks just beneath the surface? Today, we're diving into a tale that has haunted a secluded lakeside for generations. It's the story of the Green Lady of the Lake. Imagine a remote, pristine lake, surrounded by dense, ancient forests. By day, it's a picture of serenity. But when the moon climbs high in the night sky, casting its silvery glow upon the dark water, the atmosphere changes. This is when camperists, huddled around their crackling fires, whisper stories of her. They say she only appears on the clearest, most moonlit nights, a silent guardian of the deep. The legend tells of a woman, though who she was in life is a mystery lost to time. Some say she was a young bride, betrayed and left to perish in the cold waters. Others believe she was a nature spirit, intrinsically tied to the lake itself, its protector for eternity. Whatever her origin, her presence is an undeniable part of this place. Let's travel back to one specific summer night. Two friends, let's call them Alex and Ben, decided to camp by this very lake. They were experienced outdoorsmen, not easily spooked. They had heard the local legends, of course, but dismissed them as simple campfire tales, stories to scare the tourists. They pitched their tent near the water's edge, the gentle lapping of the waves, a soothing soundtrack to their evening. The fire burned low, the embers glowing like 100 tiny eyes in the darkness. The moon was a perfect, brilliant circle, its light so bright it painted the landscape in shades of silver and black. The air was still, unnaturally so. Not even a cricket chirped. It was around midnight when Alex first noticed it. A faint, ethereal glow began to emanate from the very center of the lake, and nudged Ben, pointing a trembling finger toward the water. At first, it was just a soft, pulsating light, a strange phosphorescence. But then, it started to coalesce, to take form. Slowly, silently, a figure began to rise from the shimmering water. It was a woman, draped in what looked like glowing, green moss and algae. Her form was translucent, shimmering like a heat haze on a summer road. Her hair was the most mesmerizing and terrifying part. It didn't fall. It flowed, like long, dark reeds caught in an invisible current, swirling around her head and shoulders. Her face was indistinct, a pale oval in the green luminescence, but they could feel her gaze upon them, a feeling of profound sadness and ancient power. She didn't make a sound. The only noise was the frantic beating of their own hearts in their chests. The Green Lady drifted across the surface of the water, moving toward their campsite with a grace that defied logic. She wasn't walking on the water, but rather, she was a part of it. As she drew closer, the temperature seemed to drop, a damp cold seeping into their bones. Alex and Ben were frozen in place, a mixture of terror and awe holding them captive. They wanted to run, to scream, but their bodies wouldn't obey. The figure was perhaps 50 feet from the shore when she stopped. She raised a slender, glowing arm, not in a threatening way, but as if in a gesture of warning, or perhaps farewell. And then, as silently as she had appeared, she began to sink. Her form dissolved back into the light, which then submerged beneath the dark surface, leaving only the moon's reflection behind. The strange glow vanished, and the night was once again just a normal, quiet night by a lake, or so it. Neither Alex nor Ben slept for the rest of the night. They sat with their backs against a large tree, watching the lake until the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. As the sun rose, casting a golden light across the water, they saw something that confirmed their experience wasn't just a dream or a trick of the moonlight. Stretching across the entire width of the lake were ripples. But these weren't ordinary ripples. They were perfectly formed in the shape of a long, flowing gown, as if a giant woman had laid down upon the water. The pattern was unmistakable, a silent testament to the night's visitor. Shaken, they packed up their camp in record time. On their way out, they stopped at a small, local diner for breakfast, needing the comfort of civilization. They cautiously mentioned what they had seen to the old woman behind the counter. She simply nodded, a knowing, somber look on her face. She told them that the Green Lady doesn't seek to harm. She is a guardian. She appears to those who venture too close, a reminder that the lake has its own life, its own secrets hidden in the depths. She protects something down there, the woman explained, though no one knows what. Some say it's a lost treasure, Othersayet is the resting place of a forgotten village, and some believe she simply guards the sanctity of the wilderness itself. The story of the Green Lady of the Lake serves as a powerful reminder. It taps into our primal fear of the unknown, of what lies beneath the calm surfaces of the world we think we know. Is she a ghost, a spirit, or something else entirely? Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Perhaps she is a manifestation of the lake's own soul, a beautiful and haunting warning to treat nature with the respect it deserves. So, the next time you find yourself by a quiet, remote body of water as night falls, look out at the center. Listen to the silence. And if you see a strange, green light begin to glow, remember the tale of the Green Lady. She's watching. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you have a local legend or a spooky story you'd like to share, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales that will haunt your dreams. Stay curious and stay safe. Ever heard whispers of the Green Lady of Craith's castle? Or maybe the one from Carfili? It seems every old stone building has its own spectral lady in green, a tale passed down through generations. But what if those stories aren't just stories? What if one night you came face to face with one of them? Tonight, we're stepping into a manor where the past isn't just remembered. It's waiting in the shadows. This is a story about a traveler, a mirror, and a presence that never truly leaves. Our story begins with a man named Arthur, a seasoned traveler who prided himself on his skepticism. He'd heard every ghost story under the sun and dismissed them all as local folklore, designed to spook tourists and sell postcards. So, when he found himself needing a place to stay for the night, and the only option was a grand, decaying manor on the outskirts of a forgotten village, he wasn't deterred by the innkeeper's warnings. The place was known as Blackwood Manor, and its local legend was the Green Lady. They said she was a heartbroken bride who had met a tragic end within its walls centuries ago. Her spirit, they claimed, was forever trapped, wandering the halls in her verdant wedding gown. Arthur just chuckled, paid for his room, and made his way up the winding gravel path to the imposing structure. The manor was even more intimidating up close. Ivy crept up its stone walls like gnarled fingers, and the windows seemed like vacant eyes staring out into the twilight. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and damp wood. A stooped caretaker, who looked almost as old as the manor itself, showed Arthur to his room at the end of a long, dark corridor. Before leaving, the old man paused, his voice a low creak. "Be mindful of the mirror, sir. The one in the hole." She? She likes to watch. Arthur just offered a polite smile, dismissing it as part of the local theatrics. He was tired, and all he wanted was a good night's sleep. After settling in, he decided to explore a little. The hallway outside his room was lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him. And there, at the very end of the hall, was the mirror the caretaker had mentioned. It was a massive, ornate piece, its silvered surface clouded with age. It reflected the dimly lit corridor, creating an endless, distorted tunnel of shadows. Arthur peered into it, saw his own tired reflection, and shrugged. It was just a mirror. He returned to his room, locked the door, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. It was the cold that woke him. A deep, unnatural chill had seeped into the room, raising goosebumps on his arms. The fire in the hearth had died down to faint embers. Arthur sat up, rubbing his eyes, and glanced at the time. It was just past 3 in the morning, the so-called witching hour. A faint sound, like the rustle of silk, drew his attention. It seemed to come from outside his door. His heart began to beat a little faster. He told himself it was just the old house settling, the wind rattling the ancient window frames. But a strange compulsion made him get out of bed and quietly approach the door. He peered through the old-fashioned keyhole, his gaze directed down the long, dark hallway towards the mirror. At first, he saw nothing but the familiar, distorted reflection of the corridor. But then, something shifted, a flicker of movement in the mirror's depths. He squinted, trying to make it out. It was a color, a faint, ethereal shade of green, swirling like smoke in the glass. He blinked, thinking his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. It must be a reflection from something in the hole. Maybe the moonlight hitting a piece of furniture in just the right way. He tried to rationalize it, his skeptical mind racing to find a logical explanation, but the green light didn't disappear. Instead, it began to coalesce, to gather slowly, agonizingly. The swirling green mist began to take shape. It formed the outline of a figure, a tall, slender woman. The shape solidified, revealing the details of a flowing, old-fashioned gown, the color of moss and emeralds. Her back was to him, her form silhouetted against the dark reflection of the hallway. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. His logical mind was screaming, but his eyes couldn't deny what they were seeing. This wasn't a trick of the light. This was a person. A person inside the mirror. He watched, frozen, as the figure slowly turned. The movement was graceful, yet unnervingly unnatural. As she faced him, or rather, faced his reflection in the mirror, he saw her face. It was pale, tragically beautiful. But her eyes were dark, hollow pits of sorrow and despair. They seemed to look right through the mirror, through the door, and directly into his soul. There was no anger in her gaze, no malice, just an infinite, crushing sadness that seemed to radiate from her and fill the entire hallway. The Green Lady? She was real. Every rational thought in Arthur's head evaporated, replaced by a primal, paralyzing fear. He wanted to scream, to run, to slam the door and barricade it. But he couldn't move. He was transfixed by the sorrowful woman in the glass. He felt a desperate urge to blink, to prove to himself this was just a hallucination. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, his heart hammering against his ribs. When he opened them again, his blood ran cold. She was no longer at the far end of the hallway's reflection. She was closer. Much closer. Now, a ghostly face filled almost the entire surface of the mirror, her hollow eyes just inches from his own reflected ones. Her expression hadn't changed, but her proximity was a violation, an impossible breach of space and reality. Her ethereal form seemed to press against the glass from the inside, her silent gaze pinning him in place. He didn't dare blink again. Ejustarred, his mind fracturing under the weight of what he was witnessing. He could almost feel the chill emanating from the glass, a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the cold of the grave. He could see the intricate lace on her gown, the way her spectral hair floated around her face. It felt like an eternity passed as he stood there, locked in this silent, terrifying communion with the spirit in the mirror. He lost all track of time, the world outside the keyhole ceasing to exist. He doesn't know how long he stood there, but eventually, the first faint light of dawn began to filter through the grimy windows of the manor. As the gray light touched the hallway, the figure in the mirror began to fade. Her form grew transparent, the vibrant green of her dress dissolving back into a faint, smoky wisp. Her sorrowful eyes lingered for a moment longer, a final, heartbreaking glance, before she vanished completely, leaving the mirror's surface empty and clouded once more. Arthur stumbled back from the door, his body trembling uncontrollably. He collapsed onto his bed, gasping for air. The image of those hollow eyes burned into his mind. He didn't sleep again. He simply waited for the sun to rise fully, his eyes glued to the door. As soon as it was a respectable hour, he packed his bags in a frantic haste, not even bothering to fold his clothes. He burst out of his room, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor, refusing to even glance at the mirror at the end of the hall. He practically ran down the stairs, threw the keys on the front desk without a word to the caretaker, and fled the manor without looking back. For the rest of his life, Arthur, the staunch skeptic, was a changed man. He never spoke much about what happened that night at Blackwood Manor. How could he? Who would believe him? But the experience never left him. He could never again look into a mirror in a dimly lit room without a flicker of fear. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when he'd walk down a long hallway, he would feel it. A strange, prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the distinct feeling of being watched. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that somewhere in the silver depths of an old forgotten mirror the Green Lady was still watching, her hollow eyes forever filled with a sorrow he could never comprehend. What do you think? Was it a dream? A figment of an overactive imagination in a spooky old house? Or did Arthur truly come face to face with a spirit trapped between worlds? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Thanks for watching. In the heart of a forgotten valley, nestled among rolling hills and ancient forests, lies a village so small it's barely a whisper on most maps. This village is ordinary in every way but one. It holds a secret, a story passed down through generations, spoken only in hushed tones. When the nights grow long and the fog rolls in from the river, they talk about the foggy bridge. It's not much to look at, this bridge. Just a rickety old thing made of weathered wood and rusting iron, spanning a deep, silent gorge. During the day, it's a simple crossing, creaking and groaning under the weight of anyone brave enough to use it. But at night, when the thick, white fog blankets the landscape, the bridge transforms. It becomes a gateway to something else, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. This is when they say she appears, the Green Lady. The legend is as old as the village itself. They say that long ago, a woman in a beautiful green gown met a tragic end on that very spot. Some say she was a bride waiting for a lover who never came. Others whisper she was a heartbroken mother searching for a lost child. The details are blurred by time, but the core of the story remains the same. On foggy nights, her spirit returns, forever bound to the bridge, her sorrow so profound it stains the very air with a pale, ethereal green. Generations of children have grown up with this tale, a spooky story to tell around the bonfire. For most, it was just that, a story. Before one young boy named Leo, it was a challenge. Leo was known for his courage, or perhaps his foolishness. He'd climbed the tallest trees and explored the darkest caves, always scoffing at the superstitions of the village elders. The Green Lady was just another monster in a fairy tale, and he was determined to prove it. One evening, the perfect conditions arrived. A thick, chilling fog crept up from the river, swallowing the village whole. It was a heavy, wet mist that muffled all sound and made the world feel small and claustrophobic. The air was still and cold. While other families bolted their doors and huddled by their fireplaces, Leo saw his chance. He pulled on his coat, grabbed a flickering lantern, and slipped out into the misty night, his heart a mixture of excitement and a tiny, unacknowledged sliver of fear. He made his way to the edge of the gorge. The bridge was barely visible, its silhouette a faint, skeletal line against the churning white fog. The only sound was the distant rush of the river below and the frantic thumping of his own heart. He took a deep breath, the cold, damp air filling his lungs, and stepped onto the first wooden plank. The bridge groaned under his weight, a long, mournful sound that seemed to echo in the unnatural silence. He held his lantern high, but its light was feeble, barely piercing the dense wall of fog a few feet ahead. Each step was a deliberate act of will. The wooden planks were slick with moisture, and the handrail felt cold and slimy to the touch. The farther he walked, the thicker the fog became, until he felt completely isolated, as if the village behind him and the other side ahead had vanished entirely. He was alone, suspended in a white, silent void. He was about halfway across when he first saw it. At first, it was just a subtle shift in the fog, a faint luminescence that didn't belong. It was a soft, pale green, like moonlight filtering through leaves. He stopped, holding his breath. He told himself it was just a trick of the light, a reflection from his own lantern. But the glow wasn't coming from his lantern. It was coming from ahead, from the center of the bridge. The green light intensified, pulsing gently, rhythmically, like a slow, sad heartbeat. It swirled within the fog, coalescing into a form. Slowly, silently, a figure emerged from the mist. It was a woman. Her hair was long and dark, plastered to her face by the dampness. She was wearing a gown, or what was left of a tattered ancient dress, the color of moss and decay. It was a deep, sorrowful green. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were dark, empty pools that seemed to drink the light. She was the Green Lady. Leo stood frozen, his feet rooted to the wooden planks. The courage that had propelled him this far evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold, primal terror that seized every muscle in his body. He couldn't scream. He couldn't run. He could only stare as she drifted toward him, not walking, but gliding just above the surface of the bridge. She made no sound, yet he could feel her presence, a wave of profound sadness and icy cold that washed over him. She stopped, just a few feet away, her form wavering in the fog. He could see the intricate, rotted lace on her gown and the ghostly pallor of her skin. Then she slowly raised a hand. Her fingers were long and slender, and her hand glowed with that same sickly green light. She extended it toward him, her expression unchanging, a mask of silent, eternal grief. It wasn't a threatening gesture, but an invitation, a plea, an invitation into the fog, into the cold, into her endless sorrow. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, Leo was mesmerized. He felt a strange pull, a temptation to take her hand, to step forward and see what lay beyond the veil. The world around him faded away, and there was only the glowing green hand and the sad, dark eyes of the woman in the mist. But then, a gust of wind cut through the gorge, making the bridge sway violently beneath his feet. The sudden movement shattered the spell. The primal instinct for survival screamed in his mind, overpowering the ghostly allure. He finally found his voice, a choked gasp that broke the silence. He stumbled backward, his lantern slipping from his numb fingers and clattering onto the planks, its light extinguishing with a final, weak flicker. Plunged into near darkness, with only the ghostly green glow to guide him, Leo turned and ran. He didn't look back. He scrambled through the fog, his feet slipping, his lungs burning. He could feel her eyes on his back, a cold weight that seemed to slow him down. The short distance back to the village felt like miles. He burst out of the fog bank at the edge of the gorge and didn't stop running until he slammed his front door shut, bolting it behind him. He collapsed against the door, gasping for breath, his body trembling uncontrollably. The next morning, the sun burned away the fog, revealing a clear, crisp day. The world seemed normal again. Leah, pale and shaken, refused to speak of what he had seen, but his father, along with a few other villagers, noticed the extinguished lantern lying on the bridge. Curious, they went to retrieve it. The bridge was empty. There was no sign of anyone, no trace of the green specter. It was just an old, rickety bridge in the morning sun. But as they walked toward the center, Tim, on the damp wooden planks, starting from the middle of the bridge, was a set of footprints. They went from a boot or a shoe. They were the delicate prints of bare feet, glowing with a faint, otherworldly green light that shimmered even in the bright daylight. The villagers followed the footprints. They led from the center of the bridge, back toward the edge where Leo had fled. But the most chilling part was where they began. They simply appeared in the middle of the bridge, leading from nowhere, as if someone had materialized out of thin air. The Green Lady had been there. Leo never went near the foggy bridge again. He grew up, but the memory of that night never left him. The villagers continued to tell the story, but now with a newfound respect, a real fear. They knew the Green Lady was not just a legend. She was real, a sorrowful guardian of the mist, forever walking her lonely path on the foggy bridge, leaving behind nothing but a chilling memory and a trail of glowing green footprints that lead from nowhere and go nowhere at all. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy tales of folklore and mysteries from the forgotten corners of the world, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have many more stories to share from the shadows. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one. Have you ever felt a presence in a garden after dark? That feeling of being watched, not by an animal, but by something much, much older. Tonight's story takes us into one such garden, a place where the veil between our world and the next is as thin as a single rose petal. This is the tale of the Green Lady. Our story begins with a man named Arthur, a dedicated gardener who poured his heart and soul into the sprawling estate of Blackwood Manor. The grounds were his sanctuary, but his favorite place was the grand Victorian greenhouse, a labyrinth of glass and iron filled with exotic plants from every corner of the world. Arthur often worked late, long after the other staff had retired for the evening, finding a unique peace in the greenhouse under the quiet glow of the moon. One humid summer evening, as the sun bled its final colors across the horizon, Arthur was tending to a bed of rare night-blooming jasmine. The air was thick with their sweet, intoxicating scent. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence. It was a voice, soft and ethereal, humming a melody that was both beautiful and deeply sorrowful. It seemed to drift on the air, weaving between the giant ferns and hanging orchids. Arthur froze, his trowel hovering over the soil. He was certain he was alone. The estate's owner was abroad, and the rest of the staff were in the main house, a good distance away. He strained his ears, listening. The humming continued, a lilting, mournful tune that seemed to carry the weight of forgotten memories. It was coming from deeper within the greenhouse, from the oldest section where the air was thickest with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Curiosity, tinged with a growing unease, got the better of him. He set down his tools and began to walk, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth of the pathways. He followed the sound, past rows of vibrant, sleeping flowers, and under the broad, waxy leaves of tropical giants. The melody grew clearer, and he could now make out faint words, though he couldn't understand the language. It was ancient, melodic, and filled with an unbearable sadness. He rounded a corner, pushing aside a curtain of hanging ivy, and stopped dead. There, in a small clearing bathed in moonlight, filtering through the glass panes, stood a woman. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was dressed in a gown, the color of moss and new leaves, a shade of green so deep and natural it seemed to be woven from the garden itself. Her hair was a wild tangle of dark green and brown, like ivy and roots, cascading down her back. Her skin had a pale, almost translucent quality, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She had her back to him, her hands gently caressing the petals of a ghostly white moonflower. The sad, beautiful song was coming from her. Arthur stood mesmerized, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the night air. He didn't know whether to run or to speak. He felt like an intruder in a sacred, private moment. As if sensing his presence, the singing stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Slowly, she turned. Her face was ageless, her features delicate but etched with a profound sorrow. Her eyes, however, were what truly captivated and terrified him. They were the color of jade, and they seemed to hold the ancient wisdom and secrets of the earth itself. They weren't hostile, but they were not entirely human either. She looked directly at Arthur, and a whisper escaped her lips, a sound like rustling leaves in a dry wind. "The garden sleeps," she murmured, her voice carrying a strange resonance. "It dreams of the sun. Do not wake it." Arthur was frozen in place, his heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't form a single word. The green lady took a step towards him, her movements fluid and silent, as if she were gliding rather than walking. "This is our time," she whispered, her jade eyes scanning the greenhouse. "The time of moon and shadow. The flowers you see now, they are not for you." She raised a slender, pale hand and pointed a long finger at a vibrant, crimson rose nearby. "They hold the night's secrets. To pick one is to steal a soul." Her warning was delivered with an unnerving calm, a simple statement of fact that sent a wave of pure terror through Arthur. This was no ordinary trespasser. He was in the presence of something ancient, something that belonged to the garden in a way he never could. The air grew cold, and the sweet scent of jasmine was replaced by the smell of freshly turned soil, like an open grave. He didn't need another warning. The primal instinct to flee screamed in his mind. He stumbled backward, tripping over a loose stone on the path. He scrambled to his feet, turned, and ran. He didn't look back. He ran blindly through the winding paths of the greenhouse, branches and leaves whipping at his face. The sound of her whispering voice seemed to follow him, echoing in his head. "Do not steal the souls. Do not wake the sleepers." He burst out of the greenhouse door, gasping for the cool night air, and didn't stop running until he crashed through the kitchen door of the main house, collapsing in a heap on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a stern but kind woman, rushed to his side. Seeing his state of sheer terror, she helped him to a chair and gave him a glass of water. It took several minutes for Arthur to catch his breath and stop trembling long enough to speak. He stammered out his story: the singing, the woman in green, the terrifying warning. Mrs. Gable listened patiently, her expression growing more and more grave. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, staring into the empty fireplace. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and serious. "Arthur," she said, "you must listen to me very carefully. You must never, ever go back to that greenhouse after sunset. Do you understand? Arthur nodded, confused by her reaction. But who was she? We must call the police. Mrs. Gable shook her head slowly. There is no one to call, my boy. That greenhouse. It hasn't been used in over 50 years. It was sealed shut after the tragedy. Arthur stared at her, his blood running cold. Sealed. But I was just in there. I work in there every day. No, she insisted, her eyes wide with a fear of her own. The asterisk. Old asterisk. Greenhouse. The original Victorian one at the far end of the property. The one covered in ivy, with the glass all broken. It's been abandoned since before I started working here. The story goes that the original lady of the manor, a passionate botanist, lost her mind with grief after a child passed away. They say she began to believe her child's spirit lived within the flowers. She'd spend every night in that greenhouse, singing to them, protecting them. One night, she simply vanished from within it. They never found her. A horrifying realization dawned on Arthur. He hadn't been in the modern, working greenhouse. In his pursuit of the song, he had wandered much farther than he thought, to the derelict, forgotten structure at the edge of the woods, a place he always avoided because of its crumbling state and creepy reputation. He had not met a trespasser. He had met the ghost of Blackwood Manor, the Green Lady. Arthur never worked late again. He would finish his duties as the sun began to set and hurry back to the safety of the main house. But sometimes, on nights when the moon was full and high in the sky, he would stand at his window, looking out towards the dark silhouette of the old, ruined greenhouse. He knew she was still there, watching over her garden, forever bound to her grief and her beautiful, sleeping children. Until next time, stay safe, and perhaps think twice before picking a flower after dark.